Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin Sunday. Thanks for being here. This is a big show. Two great guests, Ben Dominique and Brett Baer, our friend. Hasn't been here in a long time. You know, on this show, we like history and books, among other things, history and books. And I don't use a teleprompter, so what you see is what you get. If I'm reading something, I've written it. If I'm reading something, I give it attribution. And tonight we're going to use some books, purposely, so you know the source of my information. And what is the issue? Immigration. Oh, Mark, immigration, immigration. Immigration today is not immigration. It has no relationship whatsoever to what the framers of the Constitution meant. It has no relationship whatsoever to the history of immigration in America. The president calls it correctly, prior to his time as president, a massive invasion. And it's been a massive invasion. Why? Because the Democrat Party has wanted a massive invasion, and now they want to protect all the illegal aliens who are here. I want to remind you of a few things as we go through this. I think it's very important to have some historical perspective. No society, I write in Liberty and Tyranny, can withstand the unconditional mass migration of aliens from every corner of the earth. The preservation of the nation's territorial sovereignty and the culture, language, mores, traditions, and customs that make possible a harmonious community of citizens dictate that citizenship be granted by the consent of the governed, not by the unilateral decisions or demands of the alien, and then only to aliens who will throw off their allegiance to their former nation or society and pledge their allegiance to America. Claremont Institute senior fellow and California State University professor Edward Erler, reflecting Aristotle's observation, writes, "A radical change in the character of the citizens would be tantamount to a regime change, just as surely as a revolution in its political principles. The government, therefore, is not only justified, I argue, but obliged to qualify immigration to those who most likely contribute to the well-being of the civil society, and to create the conditions in which aliens of differing backgrounds can be absorbed into the American culture." In other words, the purpose of immigration is to contribute to and improve the existing society and the situation involving the existing citizens. That's the purpose. The late author Theodore White, who was no conservative, wrote that the Immigration Act of 1965 changed all previous patterns, and in so doing probably changed the future of America. It was noble, revolutionary, and probably the most thoughtless of the many acts of the Great Society. In the 1960s, Cesar Chavez, one of the founders of the United Farm Workers Union, vehemently opposed illegal immigration, arguing it undermined his efforts to unionize farm workers and improve working conditions and wages for American citizen workers. The UFW even reported illegal immigrants to the Immigration and Naturalization Service. In 1969, Chavez led a march accompanied by Ralph Abernathy, president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, that was Martin Luther King's organization, and Senator Walter Mondale, who, of course, ran for president as a Democrat in 1984 and got clobbered by Reagan, along the border with Mexico, protesting the farmers' use of illegal migrants. Now, these statists, as I call them, they tolerate the illegal aliens, and now they insist on them. They're violations of working, wage, and environmental standards because the aliens' babies born in America are, under the current interpretation of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, treated as United States citizens. And that is a big deal to the Democrat Party. And that's what they're counting on. Our immigration system has been radically changed because the Democrat Party, the enemy within that party, slavery, segregation, eugenics, Jim Crow, illegal immigration, rejects Americanism. Today, Marxism, Islamism. I want you to hear from the late Colorado governor, Richard Lamb. He was a liberal Democrat, but he was brilliant on this point of immigration. And in 2003, he gave a speech and said, if you want to destroy America, this is how you do it. Go.
I would like to share with you my plan to destroy America. If you think, and some do, that America is too smug, too rich, too self-satisfied, not diverse enough, too white bread, I have this plan. Toynbee, said that all great nations rise and they all fall. And he said, and the autopsy of history is all great nations commit suicide. So here's my plan, 8 parts. Number 1, I'd make it a bilingual, bicultural country. History shows us that no bilingual, bicultural country lives at peace with itself. There's not one, I believe, that doesn't exist with an incredible amount of tension and conflict, if not civil war. My second part of my plan would be to invent something called multiculturalism. This would be 2 parts. Number 1, I would say that all cultures are created equal. It would make no difference and make it impossible to talk about such things as culture. And the second one is that I would really try very hard to make people continue their cultural identity. I would replace the melting pot with the salad bowl. My third part of my plan would be to make the fastest growing demographic group in that country the least educated. I would add a second underclass to the first underclass, unassimilated, undereducated, antagonistic, and then I'd have 50% of them drop out of school, not graduate from high school. The fourth part of my plan would be to get the big foundations to fund, and big business to fund these efforts with lots of money. I would invest in ethnic identity and victimology. I would get them to think about their lack of success was only the fault of the majority. I would start a grievance industry. The fifth part of my plan is I would develop dual citizenship. I would promise people actually divided loyalties, allow them to vote for both Vicente Fox and George Bush. The sixth part, and this is important, I would place all of these subjects off limits. I would make it taboo to talk about, actually, or criticize this whole thing. I would make it come up with a word like heretic used to be 200 years ago. Let's say we'd call it racist. And I would try to accuse anybody of this that would object to my ideas. My seventh part, then, I would make it impossible to enforce our immigration laws. I would develop a mantra, let's call it this, that because immigration has been good in the past for America, it will continue to be good in the future. My eighth and last part, and it's important, is I would censor this book. This man is dangerous. He's on to my plan. Don't read this book.
That would be Victor Davis Hanson, our great friend, who was the single guest last night on Life, Liberty, and Levin. It was commonly understood at the time, whether it was Harry Reid, the former majority leader, whether it was Chuck Schumer, the current majority leader, whether it was Barbara Jordan, a great civil rights leader out of Houston who led a commission on this issue, Republican and Democrat alike understood the importance of not just securing the border, but ensuring that individuals who come into this country, not groups, individuals who come into this country have allegiance to this country, have the character and the morality to be in this country, and we don't do that anymore. The president is trying desperately to get back to this, for which he is attacked viciously. What about the founders of the country? There's a great book. It's called Vindicating the Founders, Race, Sex, Class, and Justice in the Origins of America by Professor Thomas G. West, good friend of mine. And he writes here that the policy of advantage of immigrants taking place in a body, I mean the settling of them in a body, may be much questioned, for by so doing, they retain the language, habits, and principles, good or bad, which they bring with them. Whereas by an intermixture with our people, they or their descendants get assimilated to our customs, measures, and laws. In a word, soon become one people. The key was assimilation. Benjamin Franklin had worried about the problem of immigration since the 1750s. He said in part, not being used to liberty, they know not how to make a modest use of it. In elections, they come in droves and carry all before them except in 1 or 2 counties. In short, unless the stream of their importation could be turned from this to other colonies. He was worried about massive immigration. They will soon so outnumber us that all the advantage we have will not, in my opinion, be able to preserve our language, and even our government will become precarious. Yet I am not for refusing entirely to admit them into our colonies. All that seems to be necessary is to distribute them equally, mix them with the English, establish English schools where they are now too thick settled. In other words, assimilation into the American culture and society. Madison said the same thing. Hamilton said the same thing in so many words, and I can continue to quote them and so forth. Their words are available for anybody to read. That's the founding, that's the nature of the country. So it is very liberal, opening country to certain individuals who will have allegiance, who will assimilate into the country, who will become part of the American culture. That is, to be Americanized. This has been the position of the United States government and the United States citizen since the beginning, the founding of our nation, up to apparently about 40 years ago. Another great professor, Harvard professor, Samuel P. Huntington, late Professor Huntington, who are we? He says in 1963, Glaser and Moynihan posed the question, to what does one assimilate in modern America? In 1900, the answer was clear. Assimilation meant Americanization. In 2000, now keep in mind this is a quarter century ago, the answers were complicated, contradictory, and ambiguous. Many elite Americans were no longer confident of the virtue of their mainstream culture and instead preached a doctrine of diversity and the equal validity of all cultures in America. He goes on to write, to the extent that America has become multicultural, immigrants may choose among the subcultures they encounter or choose to maintain their original culture. They may assimilate into American society without assimilating the core American culture. Assimilation and Americanization are no longer identical. These are profound and extremely worrisome observations, ladies and gentlemen. He says the differences between a patriotic public and a denationalized elite or elitists parallel other differences in values and philosophy. Governing differences between the leaders of major institutions and the public on domestic and foreign policy issues affecting national identity form a major cultural fault line cutting across class, denominational, racial, regional, and ethnic distinctions. In a variety of ways, the American establishment, governmental and private, has become increasingly divorced from the American people. Politically, America remains a democracy because key public officials are selected through free and fair elections. In many respects, however, it has become an unrepresentative democracy because on crucial issues, especially involving national identity, he means immigration, its leaders pass laws and implement policies contrary to the views of the American people. Concomitantly, the American people have become increasingly alienated from politics and government. You see, ladies and gentlemen, citizenship, assimilation, and patriotism used to come down to education, particularly public education at the turn of the last century. It was the responsibility of state and local governments to promote this kind of a belief system in Americanization, in assimilation, in our founding principles. Federal and national immigration policies focused on whether each and every individual, not group, was worthy of entering the country by character, by allegiance, by values, by the potential to contribute to the society. So when we talk about health care for illegal aliens, that turns everything on its head. When we talk about the rights of illegal aliens, that turns everything inside out. When we talk about giving driver's licenses to illegal aliens, health care in emergency rooms to illegal aliens, all kinds of benefits to illegal aliens, that has it backwards. That has never been what America has been about. Never, ever. And so we see in our streets now, what do we see? We see even violent clashes between the federal government and the President of the United States, trying to uphold what has been the American tradition for over 200 years when it comes to immigration, trying to uphold the constitutions where the president has plenary authority when it comes to immigration. The federal government does. Trying to reverse what so-called sanctuary cities and states are doing. There's no such thing. They're simply claiming immunity. They're immunity from federal immigration laws because these are Democrat cities, Democrat states that want to use the immigration system to empower themselves, to get birthright voters, to get more districts. They don't give a damn about these people, as we saw with open borders, as we saw with women being sold into sex slavery, pornography, unaccompanied children by the hundreds of thousands missing, drug cartels benefiting, drug cartels basically have indentured servants in our own country, people paying off ransom. This is what the Democrat Party has brought to the United States of America. Disunity. Here's a book, The Disuniting of America, Reflections on a Multicultural Society, by the late Professor Arthur M. Schlesinger, who was a close advisor to John Kennedy, who was a lifelong Democrat. What did he say? E pluribus unum, one of many. The United States had a brilliant solution for the inherent fragility, the inherent combustibility of a multi-ethnic society, the creation of a brand new national identity by individuals in forsaking old loyalties and joining to make new lives, melted away ethnic differences, a national identity that absorbs and transcends the diverse ethnicities that come to our shore, ethnicities that enrich and reshape the common culture in the very act of entering into it, our culture. But we have even a bigger problem today. It's called radical Islamism and Marxism. People coming into our country, people who are waved into our country by the Democrat Party and by the media and by their surrogates, who seek to overthrow our country. Can you imagine what the founders would say? Can you imagine what old-time Democrats would say? We're doing something by bringing an enemy within that are in our streets, that are funded by foreign governments, that are hostile to the West, that are funded by terrorist groups and have ties to terrorist groups, that are hostile to the West. Revolution by immigration all through Europe. Britain is not the Britain of 50 years ago. France is not the France of 50 years ago. Sweden, all of Europe. And in America right now. And then the President of the United States, who's trying to stop these Democrats in these cities and states from destroying the country and reversing 200 years of history. They say he doesn't have the authority. So their federal judges at the lower court level are trying to obstruct and sabotage the authority of the president. Well, there was a Supreme Court decision on this, only one, in 1827, called Martin versus Mott. Let me read one paragraph from that decision. The authority to decide whether the exigencies contemplated in this Constitution of the United States and the Act of Congress of 1795, a law that predated the Insurrection Act, in which the president has authority to call forth the militia, to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrection, and repel invasions, have arisen as exclusively vested in the president, and his decision is conclusive upon all persons, period. That's the only case in which the Supreme Court has ruled on this. So what are these judges doing? What are these mayors doing? What are these governors doing? They're violating the Constitution. They're nullifying our immigration laws. They're nullifying federal enforcement. They're violating the way the Constitution is constructed, where immigration is a plenary power of the federal government. They're violating a Supreme Court decision in 1827, and they walk around talking about democracy, and the people who oppose them, the president, are authoritarians. This has to be straightened out.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.